I can hear you now.
Ah, you all right? Had a nice day?
Yeah, not too bad. Do you like the mug?
Oh, yes, that's a nice mug. I'm very jealous. Um, I have got some Superman 4 cups, that I
All
Pepsi
right.
cup that they did in '87. They released 7 Up cups. That's what they are, and I
Oh,
got a full set of those off eBay. So I was quite happy with them.
was that something to do with McDonald's or?
I'm not I think, oh, it's 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven, that was it. So
Ah,
yeah,
okay,
there
something.
I don't know if there was a UK equivalent, but yeah,
I
I
did with.
treat myself to those because I've done a couple of Superman 4 events, as you know. So I thought, well, it'd be nice to have them for the event. So
I know they did the Batman, didn't they? Tim Burton's Batman at McDonald's. They released a load of stuff with them. Uh, if,
yeah, I think they did, and I know they did a lot for Batman and Robin in particular. I remember KFC did quite a big tie, and I've still got some of those toys somewhere. So
God, that might be worth some money now.
you never know. I mean, it might be sort of little things like that that people tend to discard that perhaps might be worth something possibly, but you never know. So thank you very much, Aaron, for joining me to talk about your wonderful work.
Thank you.
I just wanted to start by just asking what inspired you to do this in the first place? What gave you the idea?
Um, well, I've had the idea for some time. It started about 2 years ago, and I did. I was watching Superman 4,
Mm,
and I was watching the subway sequence, and I thought, I wonder if I could do something to make it look a little bit better. Maybe color correct Superman flying. And originally, I was just going to do a color correction
mm,
and maybe replace a shot or something that had been flying through the subway. And then I sort of got a little bit adventurous, and I thought, I wonder if it'd be possible to actually go even further and try and make it look like an American subway in New
mm.
York.
Yeah.
So I started off looking at stock footage, and I thought, well, I thought still images, yeah, you can only use still images to some degree, but you need to have a bit of life in it. So I looked at stock footage. I found some great stock footage, but the problem was it was going to cost me like £300 for one piece of footage that may only last for like a couple of seconds.
Mm,
So I thought, okay, I'm going to go in I'll try 3D. So I started using Blender, and I started to try and build the subway in 3D.
mm,
And I got so far, and then I started rendering out, and I thought, yeah, it looks too clean. It's not realistic enough. And I thought, right, I'm going to go back to looking at stock footage.
mm,
And then I found this website, and it was like pay monthly. You can use as much stock footage as you want. And then I worked using the footage from that, and I managed to work it into some sort of edits and make it look. I did a lot of rotoscoping, and editing and color correction to try and make it look like it was American Subway, and then it's just gone from there essentially.
mm.
um, yeah, that's
I've seen that version of the subway sequence that you put on YouTube, and it's fantastic. I know when I was doing my event with Harrison Ellenshaw, who did the visual effects supervisor of the film, he was very impressed in particular with that sequence. So
Yeah, I was very touched when I watched that. To get that sort of feedback, someone who's into visual effects and that sort of industry, it's really great.
yeah, because I think what was frustrating for Harrison was, of course, having so little money and so little time, and
Mm,
you know, that's one luxury that anybody wants to has now if they want to remaster it. Is that luxury, and also, of course, the technology has just come up so
y-
much since '86, hasn't it?
yeah, I mean, I had this discussion with a friend of mine recently, and I was saying about how you know, in '86 when they started filming Superman 4, you know, the technology wasn't there to do. If you wanted to do something, you know, like have a man fly, or you know, have lasers shooting out of his eyes, it would cost out, you know, thousands of dollars, you know, where today, you know, with computer technology, CGI, you can do things with a very small budget.
Mm,
And you know, times have definitely changed.
mm,
But yeah, the filmmakers back then had such a difficult challenge on their hands, you know, with a budget being sliced right down the middle. You know,
mm,
they just didn't really. It's like, well, we want to do this, but we can't because we don't have the money.
mm,
You know, and it's frustrating because if you've ever seen any sort of footage, you know, it's quite frustrating to see the filmmakers wanting to make this film, and it's not just frustrating for the filmmakers but also the actors,
mm.
because you know they put their heart and soul into wanting to make a Superman film, and it, you know, if you compare it to the first film, it just fell completely flat, you know. Uh,
And so, where did your interest begin with Superman 4? Has it always been your favorite as a kid, or how did that particularly
um,
that film?
Superman 2 was always my favorite as a kid,
Mm,
but Superman 4 was the first one I remember watching as a kid.
mm,
And my earliest memory was Superman 4. And obviously, as I've got older, Superman, the first one is probably my favorite now. It's the original.
mm,
Um, but you know, with Superman 4, growing up, there was, even as a kid, I thought there's something not right about this film.
yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know what it is. It's different. It's like I can't work out what's different about this film. And then as I started getting into the visual effects side, I started to realize why. And then I realized that, well, they didn't film it in England. They didn't film it in New York at all. You know, whenever you saw, they had an aerial shots, but everything was filmed in Milton Keynes
Yeah.
and in the studio. So it was like, and it, yeah, that's probably Superman 4 is probably going to be not my favorite Superman film, but it's the one I see that has the greatest potential to be a better film.
Mm, yeah.
Um,
I think it was the one that I seem to like the best as a kid. I think maybe because it is fast paced because of all the cuts and things, and there was a lot of action and to somebody that's 6 or 7, you're not aware of the other things that are going on. I remember at school on rainy days, or when there was other things, the matches going on, and you do sports in the afternoon. We were encouraged to bring VHSs of our favorite films, and they would select one to play for everybody. And I brought in Superman 4.
yeah,
Much to my distress, they didn't pick it, but I remember quite clearly my enthusiasm, even back as a sort of a 6, 7-year-old. So
yeah. I mean, the Superman 4's got a great story, you know,
mm,
and it was hindered by the budget, you know, as you say, you know, and it's the saddest part of it is that I can watch Superman 4 in my head with that $40 million budget, and I can
mm,
see how it would have looked. And when I do these clips, I kind of try to bring a little bit of that into reality, you
yeah,
know. As Gus Gorman says, you know, in Superman 3, it says it doesn't exist. We have to build it. You know, I think about it in my own head, you know, and it's kind of taking that philosophy and putting it into so that
mm,
people can see what you're trying to do. And that's
mm,
because to me, Superman 4 is like a painting that just needs a few more coats of paint to bring it up to a finished
mm,
standard.
yeah.
It's never going to be in the same realm as the first two films, but I do feel that there's a lot of potential for it to be a better film,
Mm,
visually, you know, so that you can sit down, watch the film, enjoy the story, and you know, when you see him flying on screen, you know, he goes from flying off from wires to then the blue screen, which is the worst part of Superman 4, is that those blue screen flying shots are atrocious. And you know,
mm,
I've even done a couple of corrections with that and brought the blue back in his costume. I've softened the edges, the backgrounds, given it a bit of a haze to make it look more like front projection than back projection, as what they used in Superman 4.
I think what's quite frustrating is that the physical flying effects were probably the best they've ever been. And, you know, they really had a good handle on it by that time. And then, of course, you cut to some very sort of dodgy looking shots. So it is quite of a, I think, again, talking to Harrison, because they had so little time, so much visual effects were going to so many different effects houses in the UK, America. So by the time they got it all back, some of it, you know, wasn't what they wanted, but they didn't have time to send it back and say do it again. So it
Yeah.
is, you know,
Well, I mean,
consistent.
I'll give an example. There's a shot when Chris is flying up and he's grabbing the Statue of Liberty, and as he starts to go upwards, the keying was done awful. You can see his boots become transparent, almost start to become transparent, because the buildings go through the boots, through the keying process. And there's a couple of shots like you see a lot of blue auras around like Lois's hair, around Chris's shoulders at times. There's even parts where part of his suit becomes transparent, you know. And yeah, the thing is, 86, it was difficult in them times. You know, nowadays, if I could do it like that, the click of a finger in a computer, and it would, you'd have flying shots that would look brilliant in a matter of, excuse me, in a matter of hours, you know, rather than days. It's just a shame, you know, because you know, I can count the number of errors and flaws on the film on my fingers, but I could also fix those problems,
Yeah.
you know, if I was given an opportunity, you know.
I just wondered where your talent for this works. Have you had jobs doing sort of effects, or is it something that you self-taught?
I'm self-taught. Yeah, I started off back when I was living in Spain, because I lived in Spain for 6 years, and I started doing. I don't think I've got any of the videos now, but I started doing acting reenactments. So I was doing like, you know, film scenes from like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Terminator, and all that. And my first use of visual effects was doing split screen, and I would have, you know, playing two parts and put them on the screen at the same time. So that was my first introduction with video, but I've been doing photo editing, restoration, photo effects for a number of years before that. So I've kind of just integrated that from what I've learned being self-taught into video. And yeah, I've just gone, you know, I'm just sort of self-taught really. I never went to university or college to study it. And I've always been able to work out what I need to do. You know, if there's something that's like, I might sit there for like 10 minutes or maybe half an hour thinking, how am I going to achieve this effect? And I'll find a solution. You know, I'll find a way to work to do it. Your camera's frozen, by the way.
It'll probably fix itself in a minute.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll find a solution. And I think it's like anyone that does visual effects, you know, it doesn't matter your skill level. You always think, oh, how am I going to do this? And I mean, it's the same thing with like when they did Superman 4. I can imagine they must have been sitting down thinking, how are we going to do this? You know, it's just going to be impossible, you know, where today you just do it on a computer. But yeah, it's as I said, I just really got inspired from doing my stuff with, you know, photo, and then got into the video side, and then I've gone more into the visual effects.
Of course, there's been one of the most exciting things we've had Superman fans for a long time was in 2006 when we got the DVD and the deleted scenes, of course, that are pictured in your background. I mean, what was your feeling when you saw it? Because for me, there was a lot of anticipation, and yeah, and it was kind of unfortunate. It was a mixed bag, wasn't it? I think when we saw them.
I think I was absolutely gobsmacked, because up till I think 2000. I think when people started to realize that there was deleted scenes of Superman 4, we believed that it no longer existed, that it was all, you know, destroyed, and it no longer existed, and there was only those like couple of photos that were put online of Clive Mantle as the first nuclear man. And then when the clips they showed that it was on the DVD, it was like, I was like, wow. But it was like, it didn't help with the music that they put on the clips, and it just made it. It was like, and I'm going, like that, and then when you see Clive Mantle standing in all his glory, in the nude with like this metal dish over his private region,
Yeah.
you kind of go, yeah, I can understand why they probably deleted it now.
Unfortunately,
But
yeah.
then if you hear the original soundtrack over that sequence, it's not as bad. It's
No.
the music changes the complete tone of the scene. And I think, I mean, as you know, they didn't put all the footage on there. You've got the interior stuff of the Metro Club, which isn't on there. I believe it's due to the music rights at the time. I think it's something to do with copyright issues. And they put a very rough work print on the DVD. And now, as far as I know, the reason they do that is that they have a higher version of it, but they do that to stop people making fan cuts.
Yeah.
And it's like, rather than put a big watermark on it, they go, right, we'll just put the rough work print on there. We'll just show them what there is, and we'll keep it all the original footage, so that later date we may release an extended cut, which I think is how a lot of studios work.
Yeah, you want to edge your bets and think, well, although you don't think commercially at this point, maybe in the future, if you put it all out at one go, you can't keep, you can't sell it, can you? So
yeah.
And I think it's quite an interesting point about the fans have put the actual finished soundtrack, the music, over these deleted scenes. I think the one thing it proves is that they are very much almost locked in terms of the length and the cuts. It seems to match pretty closely, although the Nuclear Man 1 Metro Club fight doesn't quite match. The music, I think, is slightly longer than what we see in the sequence. It's almost like it's a little bit, and I was thinking maybe it's a skip throw that we're not
Yes,
seeing.
there is a as fans probably know, there is a shot of Chris standing in the street holding holding the skip above his head. As far as I know, I think that was actually not a promotional shot. I think it was actually a scene that was filmed. As Clive Mantle did an interview with Martin some time ago, and he stated that the sequence was much longer, and they did a lot more to that sequence. So it's possible that the music could have been longer, or there could have been moments of silence, and the music came back on as well. I think the sequence was definitely longer than what we see, and it's kind of, when you see the deleted scenes, you can sort of think, oh my god, this is awful. But then you can understand. I understand it from the point of view that Clive Mantle is playing a character that's supposed to be like a child. He's an imperfection. He's a bizarro, sort of nuclear man, if you will, in comparison to the second one that comes on later.
Well, Clive Mantle had, before he got the role, he was in the West End in Of Mice and Men, playing the Lenny character. And that, I think, is a heavy influence, he was saying to me, of how he what he brought to Nuclear Man. And I suppose that, although he said to me as well that what he shot was a lot more, but of course when you're on a set, and because I don't think he ever would have seen any dailies or anything like that, so you do shoot for an awful long time, and then the final result is quite brief. So whether or not it just felt like there was more in the sequence, because you're on the set a lot, and then of course with the years going by, it's difficult to tell how, because of just judging from other sequences in the film, everything's very get from A to B straight in a straight line. There's no sort of like with Superman, other Superman films, you've got more money, more time, there's more flourishes, it's more,
Yeah.
there's more of an artistry to it. Superman 4, because it was shot so quick, was just get to that, just get here, just get here. So it might, unfortunately, not be too much longer than what we've seen.
Yeah. I mean, there is the obviously you've got the Metro Club sequence. I think there's a shot with Lacey and Clark walking, going into the Metro Club, and a couple wants to get into the Metro Club, and they get refused, and Superman or Clark blows them onto the dance floor, which would be quite interesting to see. And then the Nuclear Man comes in, Lacey and Clark are dancing, and then this woman drags him, starts flirting with Nuclear Man, which obviously then goes to outside, and then Clark changes into Superman, and then that's when the fight starts. So that's you're probably talking about at least 3-4 minutes of footage there that probably hasn't been
certainly precluding the sequence. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I have seen about, I think it's 3 variations of the still with Christopher throwing the skip. So 3 different images, which could indicate an actual sequence, or of course you take lots of photos for publicity purposes. So it's, but again, Clive is adamant that it was part of the sequence, but
maybe Superman was just throwing Superman 4 into the skip.
Interesting picture given. Yeah, I'm surprised nobody's done an article with using that. They probably have.
Yeah, probably.
They're being sort of trashing the film, but
I think it's, you know, I think in terms of trashing the film, I mean, my father used to work in the industry. He worked at Pinewood production doublist, and my father said a number of times, he said, oh, it's Superman 4, he said, it's dreadful, he said it should never have been made. But that's what my dad's words were. He said it was just very bad. But you know, I just think that the film has a lot of potential to be a better film. And you know, if you're going to apply CGI effects to the film to make it better, as I stated from the beginning, what I've been doing this is that I want the CGI effects to feel like they're part of the era of the film, and not look like a modern visual effects, you know. So you can watch the film and think, well, that's actually, it looks like it could have been filmed or done in 86, 87, rather than going in the direction of kind of like a George Lucas kind of Star Wars direction. You know, I don't want to go into that direction, but I want the effects to look like they're more fit the time. You know, it not go in a direction, say the heat vision from Man of Steel on Christopher Reeve Superman. It doesn't fit. You know, it doesn't fit the time. So.
I think a very good example of what you're saying would be probably the director's cut of Star Trek: The Motion Picture. That all the new visual effects they had in that one do look like they could be, you know, from 1979. So it is a perfect mix. So something that's sympathetic to the era and the rest of the footage.
Yeah. I mean, sorry, because the same with the thing is if you're going to apply like CGI effects into a film of that era, you know, like the 70s and all that, or 80s, because obviously with digital tends to be much more cleaner and sharper, so you kind of downgrade the picture a bit. You have to add a bit of grain to match the optical kind of effects of the time, and soften the picture up a little bit as well, so that it blends in with those elements of the 35mm film.
One thing I've always wondered a bit is John Shirley's editing, whether or not that is part of the problem with the film, and that how much footage there might be, you know, there wasn't used, and whether or not anything like that, you know, has any chance of existing really. But whether it was his editing is so punchy to, you know, maybe there's more, maybe it hides a lot of sins in the way that the scenes were filmed, or whether it was, again, if everything else was so rushed, was the editing as well, because John Shirley, of course, was an excellent editor. So you do think that every aspect of the film was affected. So I suppose in best case scenario, it would be going back to the original, you know, negatives and sort of almost putting it back to the bit like I did with the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2. Go back to everything, re-edit it, put it all back together like that.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, I suppose.
I think the problem is that the biggest challenge he had was taking a 134-minute film, cutting it down to 89, 90 minutes, depending on if you watch the theatrical or the international version, and cutting out enough material that you leave a film that makes sense without too many loopholes.
Yeah.
And as you know now, once you realize what's been deleted and you watch the theatrical version, you now know all these loopholes. You see all these loopholes, like when Nuclear Man says, "Where is the woman?" and then he goes, "Give it up, you never find her." And you go, how does he know? How does he know who he's talking about? You know, and for years he's like, well, it's like, who's he talking about? And obviously you've got that cut with the newspaper of Lacey Warfield, which then obviously he then goes to the Daily Planet and takes Lacey and takes her up to Wax, and then there's the whole sequence with, you know, Superman, and then it goes into Metropolis with the destruction. But yeah, there's so many loopholes, and as an editor, I can imagine it was very difficult to cut that down and try and cover those areas where I think they even had to re-loop some of the dialogue, especially.
Yeah, there is that bit when he's creating Nuclear Man in the lab with Lenny, and they use the line about creating a being from Superman's hairstyles, because of course that was the Clive Mantle scene. So of course that's I think the most obvious one. I think also when Mark Pillar arrives and Lenny says, you know, look, and then it cuts, and of course what he would have said was, hasn't he changed or something? So there would have been a reference then to the previous one. So there has been some changes to not only losing scenes, but also a couple of scenes have been changed to sort of cover the issues.
Yeah, because Lenny said, look, Lex, he looks like, and then it cuts.
Yeah. But I don't know whether John Shirley was the one because I think again, Harrison covers this better than I will, but I think he was saying that when Warner Bros. Had a look at it, they said we need to lose 2 reels, so 45 minutes of the film, and Sidney Furie said, okay, well, let's work it out. Maybe I can reshoot stuff and we'll truncate it. And they said, no, we want it gone. We want it now. We're not giving any more money. So I don't know whether somebody at Warner Brothers went down there and cut the film as opposed to John Shirley, because of it's such a mess, because it doesn't seem to be a coherency in terms of what has been taken out, which an editor I think would have done, because I think they would perhaps have kept some of the Lex Luthor stuff, particularly the bashing of the shoe on the table and little bits like that don't have the effects that would have worked. So I don't know whether, I know certainly Sidney Furie didn't have any say in the theatrical cut, and I've got a feeling it was somebody just coming in and doing it quickly, and that was it, really.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, the sequence with the second Nuclear Man and Lacey, when he takes her and she slaps him across the face, and I don't know why they didn't leave all that in, but it may be that in that sequence the first Nuclear Man is mentioned, and maybe they realized, well, we can't use that sequence because it refers to something that's not going to be in the film. So they said, right, we can just cut the whole big portion of that out, and we'll just cut to him looking at the newspaper, and then it goes straight into Metropolis. But then how did Superman know where he was going to be? And obviously it makes more sense when you watch the deleted scenes. You kind of get an idea of the sequence and the story, how it flowed better. And maybe they just cut it because they didn't get time to finish the effects. the visual effects. That's another thing as well. So it could have been the blue screen plates. They didn't film it properly. I don't know. They didn't chroma key it in time. So if the original elements still exist, they've still got the negatives with the blue screen flying shots and the background plates, and that would be very easy to recomposite that back into a new edit of the film.
And we discussed it a couple of days ago, but I think some fans might be a bit concerned with the fact that this footage is getting on a bit, and chances of it being in a usable state should there be a green light to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. It's like, I think before the footage that we saw, the work print, well, the rough print we saw on the DVD, nobody thought it existed. It was destroyed, and we would never ever see it. But all of a sudden, bang, it's there. I mean, the stuff gets degraded, but I would hope that if it's in a can somewhere, they've found all the raw negatives, and it can be watchable. It can still be restored. As I said, as long as they can bake it and clear it up, and Warner Brothers do have a work print of it. I mean, what quality that work print is in, that's a question that we'd have to. Does it have a timestamp on it? Is it got incomplete visual effects? Is the overlays of the flying shots like on the DVD, where it's almost like he's red and he's sort of transparent like a ghost? It's hard to know without actually going into Warner Brothers themselves, and but I really do hope it is that they have everything, because even if they don't, it would be great to be able to do some restoration with the theatrical cut of the film, because I think even the theatrical cut could do with some sort of restoration, more than just a simple, color correction.
Yeah, because I think they have sort of touched it a bit when they did the DVD, because some flying shots I thought on the DVD release in 2006 looked quite washed out. When you looked at the Blu-ray, there was more color here and there. So they are doing little things. But thinking ahead to this quite exciting news that the 4Ks are coming out next year, what's kind of the realistic hopes for how they might look?
I'm worried. I'm not so worried about Superman 1 and 2. 3 should be okay, but Superman 4, it's not a film I would put on 4K in this current state. If they're going to go with the direction of a simple color correction, I wouldn't even bother releasing it on 4K. I would invest a bit of money and get it properly restored. I honestly don't think we're going to see anything brand new. I just think it's going to be kind of like an upgrade from what we had with DVD, then it went on to Blu-ray, and now going into 4K. I don't think we're going to see anything like the TV cuts, extended cuts of the films. I think they will release them, but I think they'll do them individually.
Yes.
Like they did with the 3-hour cut, the Superman the movie. And I think that then what they might do then in the future is do a new box set, and just do the 4Ks and then maybe the extended cuts in one big massive box set at a later date, because they know fans will buy them again. I've got probably 2-3 copies of Superman somewhere, so
I've got a few myself.
So I do have my reservations. I mean, the thing is, obviously, when you've got any optical effects, they're always going to show a little bit more when you put them in 4K, because you do have that grain and things like that. But I just hope that they don't do any kind of like getting rid of the grain and make the picture look too clean and waxy, or anything like that. I'm personally not bothered about having the 4K releases of the films. I think the Blu-ray ones are okay as they are. But I would rather see, personally, if they've got the extended cuts of Superman 2, 3, and 4, I would rather they invest the time in releasing them than doing the 4K editions of what we've already got on Blu-ray.
Yeah, there's obviously money going into doing it in the 4Ks, and with that money, it'd been better spent doing the extended cut of Superman 2 would of course be the more obvious one, and judging by the sales of the 3-hour Superman the movie cut, it would be profitable. I think it may be another thing of testing the water and seeing what Superman sort of what people's appetite is for the Christopher Reeve films, and if the 4K sell well, then I think more be down the line. But I don't think I'll buy them, to be perfectly honest, because I've got the Blu-ray. If I just had the DVD, I might, but you don't. And Blu-ray is pretty good, in terms of picture quality, and so I think for most people, especially when you're sort of thinking, or do I put my heating on, or do I buy some food at the table? I think people will have less concerns and getting a little bit more clear pictures. So be interesting to see how they sell. I just wanted to ask you about, so we mentioned the subway, your work on the subway scene being probably the work you're the most proud of. Is there other scenes that you've worked on that you're very happy with the results, and other things you're still sort of tinkering with?
One of the other big sequences that I like doing, enjoy doing, was the Lacey in space. And I completely took out the space sequence. Well, I changed the backgrounds and made it look like they're still in Earth, and had the sort of fallen into the ocean, and then he flies back to the city all in night, and then he picks Nuclear Man up and then takes him into this like a vortex wormhole that's out in space and drops him in there.
Yeah.
And that was just a fan sort of idea for me, but it was one of the big sequences a lot of people have problems with. This, because I always had a problem as a kid, and I'm thinking, how is she breathing in space? It doesn't make sense. It's not. It's a sequence. I mean, okay. I mean, we're talking about a man who can fly here and shoot lasers out of his eyes, but there has to be a certain level of realism, and you can't have someone who's like this breathing in space, and I think this is the same thing. I think that's why one of the reasons why they cut out the Jeremy sequence at the end, because he's not in a spacesuit, and he's talking above the Earth, and it's like, and they wave past the cosmonauts in space, and it's like, it doesn't make sense, because in the comic book he has a spacesuit on.
He does, doesn't he? Yeah.
So my idea is, if I had the access to the original footage, is I'd get a spacesuit, or I'd get a kid in a spacesuit. I would film him on a green screen or blue screen. I would composite him over Jeremy's body, and then I would do a digital or maybe even a real helmet to cover Jeremy's face and head, and have him speaking as if he's talking through a speaker. So I would actually put him in a spacesuit, to make that scene more feasible. And I think if they had something like that, it would make the shot and the ending look a lot better as well. But yeah, that the Lacey in space is probably one of my favorites. And also probably the Great Wall of China, when
that's another good one. Yeah.
Adding the super speed and then using the heat vision to sort of weld the bricks back. That's those ones are I'm most proud of.
I think they fixed a couple of the biggest plot holes in the film. And originally, when I saw the Lacey in space sequence, more recently, I was thinking, well, was it meant to be just high above the sky, but because it was easy to put a space plate behind them, that it was just sort of a budget thing. And then of course you look at the Jeremy sequence at the end, you realize actually it was probably always intended to be in space. I can't remember what it says in the script, how it's written, but I'll have a look later. But it did seem quite odd that they sort of went with that approach, and particularly the Jeremy scene. It would be quite nice if you say that to have the space helmet on, and maybe as he talks, cut to the UN and seeing people's reactions to what he's saying, or
Yeah,
that would
that
quite,
would.
quite interesting.
Yeah, it's the thing is that the thing that Superman 4 suffers from is sense of scale.
Yeah.
You know, you don't get a sense of that when you watch the film. You know, when he's talking at the United Nations building, for example, it's almost like he's just talking to a small crowd in the UN. It's like, but he's not talking to the whole world. And I've done a rough shot recently. It's in a very rough state at the moment, but I had Times Square, and you know, I've got him on the screen, and the people were cheering as he says, "I'm going to rid the world of all nuclear weapons," and they all start cheering. So it's just to try and increase the scale, and that's something that I think the filmmakers originally wanted to do. But as I said, budget-wise, they couldn't go over to America and film those shots on, you know, the UN or, you know, at Times Square, you know, like they would have done if Richard Donner or in all budget had been a lot bigger.
I think it just also shows how late in the day the budget was cut as well, because if it had a lot of time, you could rework the script a little bit to make it a more smaller film. But you've got this huge film with this small budget, and I think again, what Howson was alluding to, and also the Callan documentary, I think that most people have seen, Electric Boogaloo, suggests that the budget was 17 million, but even then they were still cutting away at that as it was going. Checks were bouncing. So what the actual spend on it, maybe even less than the 17 million. I you know, that's my gut feeling, really.
I think they even made budget cuts even towards the opening credits sequence, because if you watch, there's an old trailer for Superman 4. It's Israel. I think it's an Israel trailer of Superman 4, and they've actually got streaking credits just like the original. You know, it shows, you know, like Christopher Reeve, Marie Hemingway, and they're just like the proper credits.
Oh, right.
And the budget, and it just says Superman 4. It doesn't say the Quest for Peace under it. So my theory is that these were the actual credits that were going to be used for Superman 4. But by the time they, you know, made cuts to the film and the budget and all that, they run out of money to do the rest of the credits.
Yeah.
So then we ended up with these cheap blue and red echoey credits going behind the earth. And it wasn't quite up to the standard as the earlier films. And that's something else that I've also tried to do as well. I've done the opening credits.
Very impressive.
Trying to sort of integrate the original streaking effect but keeping the sort of tone of the color scheme with the blue and red and yellow.
It was Martin Asbury, who was on the storyboard artist on the film, that was in charge of the group, because everybody was doing multiple roles, because of course you couldn't afford everybody, and he had no background doing that sort of thing, but he was doing matte paintings and miniatures and all sorts of things beyond his normal realm. And of course Sydney handed him the credits, and he just had no money, and that was the best they could. I think they're pretty good as a composite. You know, they don't, you know, they stand up okay, but of course that they show there's no money in them. So as for themselves, what you could do, you know, pretty good, but you know, far from what he would have wanted.
Yeah, I just think it's a shame that the movie makers didn't get the money to do what they wanted to do, you know. And what I'm trying to do is, it's not just tribute and respect for the film, you know, for Christopher Reeve, but also the filmmakers and everyone that worked on this film. You know, I'm not trying to destroy their hard work or anything, but I'm just trying to improve what they couldn't do in 86, you know, and 87, and give, because sadly I know some of the people that worked on the film are no longer with us, but it would be nice for those that are still alive to be able to see Superman 4 again and see it like
family, and you know, and I have tried to get Clive Mantle to do one of my events, and because I did an email interview, a very in-depth one with him, and he was telling me things that may not still be generally sort of out there, and he feels very hurt by it, as a lot of people do, and he just doesn't want to talk about it. He it wasn't that he wasn't cooperative, it's just something that is still very raw after all those years, especially when you're a young actor, and it's billed as your big break, and you're fourth film in a very successful series, and then to not have been told until very, very late in the day that all your stuff's gone. So I understand why for a lot of people they just don't like to talk about it. Same with Meryl Hemingway. I haven't been able to get her for anything, and I think it is a bit of a sore spot, or just kind of maybe even almost a bit of an embarrassment to some people's careers.
I mean, as you say, I also aspire as an actor as well, and I did a short film a few years back, and it was only a few weeks of work, but it took me months for me to actually. It took me nearly over a year before I got any footage that sent to me, and when I got the film, it wasn't complete. Visually, it didn't look great. In some shots it did, but other shots it was so dark you couldn't see anything, and I was really disappointed. So I can understand Clive Mantle's point of view, where you work on a film, your agent comes to you and says, "Look, I've got this project here. You're going to be in a Superman movie." You go, "What? Superman? Going to be in a Superman film? Great! It's going to be a big film. It's going to be a big money spinner. It's going to, I'm going to have a great resume. It's going to bring me lots of offers." And then his part was completely cut, and I would. If it was me, I'd probably be smashing the doors down. I would not have been a happy bunny, and I can understand why he feels the way he does. Again, this is something that I'm doing this for Clive as well. I want to allow people to see his performance. And because it's we're talking about over 30 years now. And I know it's a long time, but I think every performance should be able to be seen by the audience, and I think that it's a shame that it's like he basically kicked him in the teeth. I don't know how they managed to get to him, because he's 6'5", but he's. I spoke to him briefly on Twitter, and he said I did the opening credits, and I think he gave me a thumbs up for it.
Oh, good. Yeah, I did think of asking him if he'd seen that, and I'm glad he has. Yeah.
But I said to him, I in one of my tweets, I said, this is for you as well. Not just Chris. Margot and everyone else that performs. And the great thing is I've also had the backing from Christopher Reeve's children as well, especially Matthew Reeve.
Yeah.
And he loves it. He's loved the work I've done. And when I got that, I got a bit emotional, because to me that was, well, Chris is no longer here, and I'm getting a bit emotional thinking about it now. But to have one of his own children come up and say, "Hey, look, we love you, what we've done," and keep on going. It's, to me, you can't get better than that.
That's high praise indeed, isn't it? Really. And I think you are aware that Warner Bros. is kind of knows what you're doing. There is a consciousness that there is people that want to see it.
As far as I know, they are. I haven't been sued yet. So, I'm hoping they don't. I hope that they'll. Apparently, I've heard that they've seen some of my stuff, and they haven't disliked it, as far as I know. And I don't think they don't say much. All I know is that I think they have seen it. I hope I haven't given them any ideas, but to go and do it their own way. But
I mean, if you can't work on an improved version, but if you're kind of part of the genesis of something that they do, again, of course, that is, an important contribution. But it just seems, I know the finances, of course, very different when it comes to us doing our personal projects on our own time. There's no money, where as opposed to hiring in visual effects people, because they've got to be quite careful, of course, who they bring into from outside. So that would probably mean that they would, for the most part, want an established team that has worked on films to do it, in addition to any specialists like yourself that might come into it. So the money, I don't know what the if you had to put a figure on how much it would cost to do, whether or not there's any, whether you sat down and thought, oh, how much would you need from Warner Bros. to sort of do it, if you're paying everybody what they would normally get paid, and because it's a commercial product at the end of it, the finances have to be done in a certain way. So
I wouldn't want to give you a figure
no,
because I don't want to sell myself short if they ever do come up to me and say, "Oh yeah, we'll pay you that." It's like, I mean, you could have asked for more. I see. The thing is, I mean, you can get a team to do a restoration, but you've got to understand, with a lot of teams, they are working on multiple projects, and it's like a lot of the time things are rushed, and not necessarily the heart's not in it as much. So if your heart's not in it, the passion's not in it, the end result is not going to be as spectacular. Now, if you take Star Trek, the motion picture, a lot of passion and heart went into that, and it shows. And I think that I'm not being disrespectful or anything like that, because it takes a lot of work to sit on the computer and edits and all that. But I feel I have an understanding of the film, to the point that I could restore it. And all Warner would have to do is put all the elements onto a hard drive, and I could do it all from home. And I've got the equipment to do it. I've got the equipment to edit it, and I would, I work 24 hours a day if I had to, just to get it done. And because I've been working on this for like the last 2 years, and I've been doing clips and up for the last 2 years. A few people said, "Why don't you do your own fan edit, and put it online?" I don't want to do that, because I don't want to step on Warner Brothers' toes. And then you have the copyright issues. You can't distribute a film. When you can do clips, there is the copyright, but as long as you're not making any money out of it, it's fine. But then if you start putting a copy of it, whole film online, then it becomes a different matter. And that's what I want to avoid. A few people have asked me, "Can I use your clips?" And I said, "I'd rather you not, because I don't really want it to be put online. If it's gonna be for yourself in your own cut, then yeah, go ahead. But I that's why I put the watermark on my clips. For that reason."
And one thing I would quite like to see, I don't know how it could be done, but you mentioned the birth of Nuclear Man 1 and that very unfortunate metal, because that's the petri dish that he was grown out of, that somehow seems to settle there. And until Clive Mantle explained what it was, I just thought it was like something they put there temporarily, and then they would do like an Austin Powers type sort of tracking shot. Well, that of course what probably they should have done. So if there's anything that, I don't know whether from a CGI point of view, there's anything that can be done to kind of make that sequence feel a bit more, to do like an Austin Powers, objects covering his modesty, whether that wouldn't work. I'm sure that'd be awfully fiddly, but that's the only way that I could think of making it seem a bit more acceptable. Because even if you fix the rest of the film, you put that scene in there, because I think Sidney Furie was a bit out of his depth with Superman, because he hadn't done a film like that before. And I think particularly the Nuclear Man 1, I'm not quite sure of the production schedule, whether that was early in the film, he was still kind of finding his feet, or maybe just some parts of the script he didn't quite have such a vision for as others. And it does seem that there is some flaws in how that scene in particular is crafted, and it's a question of how do you make that cinematic in a way that audience will accept.
I think the best way around that would be to CGI out the dish on his private area, and then perhaps add a bit more smoke to cover that area.
Yeah, without making it
Make it a bit more like it's in shadow.
Yeah,
that would be the best way around that.
Yeah.
I've already thought about that. It would probably increase the tone a little bit, make it a little bit more serious, I think. But it kind of helps run the gag later on when Lenny takes a bit of the material and goes, "Lax, this ain't going to cover him." It's like because he's referring to the first one where he was completely naked, you know. So, but yeah, something like maybe sort of an airbrushing out that petri dish, you know, and then just add some more smoke effect to it. That would sort the issue out, I think.
Yeah, or maybe tightening up the shot or something, make it more sort of a mid one, a long shot, or something perhaps.
Yeah, or you could have an object there, you know, that you could place a statue or something in the shot, and it covers that area. That's another way you could do it as well.
I mean, do you reference because a lot of the storyboards are online from the film? Does that inspire some of your ideas or the script?
Yeah, I think I got a lot of from the commentary, the you know, from the film, the commentary on the film, because you know he mentions was it Mark? What was his name?
Mark Rosenfeld. Yeah.
Mark Rosenfeld. He mentions you know the subway sequence, and he said that Superman was going to be dodging trains, and which is what I kind of integrated in the subway sequence, where I have Chris flying down and then the train's tooting its horn and he flies past it like that. So I got inspired by the commentary, and he also mentions about the United Nations. He said, "Oh, if you know, if Richard Donner filmed this, then he would have gone and filmed it at the United Nations building and all that." And I do have possible the plan to do some sort of edit maybe in the future in terms of make it look like the United Nations rather than Milton Keynes. By replacing the shots and giving it more of a New York feel. I actually did do a shot of Chris at the end. I think I've got it online somewhere, where he flies in to do this speech at the end, and I've got him coming in, and I've actually put New York buildings behind, and it looks like he's in New York now. And I put a bit of ambient sound effects of like busy street sounds, just to increase the scale and depth of the scene. But little things like that, just even adding the sound effect can make a massive difference.
Oh yeah, it's surprised that the little touches can make quite a difference, can't they?
Yeah, but I've gone a little bit reserved at the moment in terms of working the Times Square sequence. I'm going to do probably earlier in the year, because I've got so much work to do at the moment. But I'm sort of trying to step back a little bit as well, because I don't know what Warner Brothers are doing with Superman 4 with this 4K. As I said, it probably will be just it'll probably just be the theatrical cut in 4K. But is it going to be an extended version? I don't know. I'll be honest with you, I would be happy, but I would be very disappointed, because I feel like it would be a kick in the teeth to me, having invested so much time and effort into showing the fans what's possible with Superman 4, and you know, I've had a lot of fans saying, "Oh, Warner Brothers should give you the opportunity to do a restoration on this film," and I'm passionate, you know, and I think, you know, if you're going to restore a film, you've got to have that passion, you've got to have that love for that film. If you don't have the passion and love, it's not gonna work.
No, and I think that the best thing to do is from their point of view, if we're ever going to see a restored version of it, it has to be done, I think, while there's still a bit of mystique around some of the footage, so that there's still, if you just release the work print, I mean, I'll be very happy with that. I mean, even the work print that's on the DVD, if you just the whole thing of that would be very interesting from a filmmaking point of view, and to see how it's kind of a film's put together in those early stages. But if they kind of do that, yes, we'll see all the scenes, but that will be it. They'll never touch it again, because there's no see these scenes you've never seen, restore, it's just going to be a souped up version of something that is already there. So in a way, it was very, it kept their options open by not releasing the Metro Club scene, and other sequences that we know that weren't on the DVD, and of course the graveyard scene and very early in the film that was what was cut. Wasn't even in, I think, the 134-minute version. So it's good that in some respects we don't have it yet. That there's still an option.
I'd be interested to see that the cemetery sequence, with Chris, sitting kneeling down by the gravestone of both Martha and Jonathan, because one thing with Superman films is that after he leaves Martha Kent, in the first one, you don't hear, or the only time that the Kents have referenced is in Superman, Superman 2, when he says to Lois, he says, "When my father died, that's my Earth father, that is." And then he mentions Martha, Lacey mentions it, says, "You haven't been back since your mother passed away," but there was it was no reference of him going to the graves or anything like that. So almost like he had forgotten them.
Yeah, I think that was one of the good things of Superman 3, wasn't it? He went back to Smallville, and it was Lala Lang, wasn't it? They were talking about you haven't been back since your mum passed. So there is that. So it is, as you say, it's not really touched upon that much, but we certainly would say Superman 3 coming into it, it makes kind of sense to see it in 4, to go back and close off that particular part of the story. So from that point of view. From a storyboard point of view, I think there is a storyboard I saw. It was of the fight between Nuclear Man 2 and Superman in space. And I think there's a moment where they're fighting quite close to the rings of Saturn, and Superman knocks Nuclear Man into the rings and disturbs, and little things like that I'd quite like to see in an extended fight or something. But whether or not that is, because then of course you're talking about probably CGI recreations of the two characters, and to feel like that. But that would, because again, that was of course envisioned to be a much more spectacular sequence.
It all depends if they actually filmed those sequences.
I've got a feeling probably no, but
I think it would have been too visually, technically. I think the only way you get around that would be complete CGI. I can imagine they may have filmed certain shots of it, perhaps, but I think probably what they would have done, they would have just used like the shot when Chris punches him in the back and he goes out like that. Maybe something like that they would have used again as a shot, because they, as you said, they use repeated shots. It would have been interesting to see how they would have done it. Even probably back then, it would have been a struggle, even if they had the budget.
I think the little things like that, they would have looked at it and said, well, take that out, take this out. Let's make it a bit more straightforward. Because you think that the flying sequence with Lois and Superman was not in the script. It was a later edition. I think Christopher Reeve had the idea, and you just imagine people like Harrison thinking you want to add more visual effects shots. I mean, we can barely, all about the tears of the ones we've got. So I think, that must have taken obviously quite a bit of time. So, and it's less time you can have for other things. So
I think Chris wanted the sequence and flying with Lois, because I think he wanted to do that throwback to the first film.
It was a perfect idea, wasn't it? And it was an obvious one, but of course it wasn't in the script. But it was such a good. That's one of my favorite moments, I think, from the film. So wonderful late edition.
It's a shame because they used the blue screen on those shots throughout, and if the budget had been behind, they would have used front projection, like the shot when Superman and Lois flying to the fortress, that is a beautifully shot sequence, with the the ice cap mountains and all that. That's how it should have been in Superman 4.
Yeah.
And because they had the budget cuts, they cut a lot of the flying units. It was the only film in the series that didn't use front projection. So and as you know, with blue screen, it was designed really to be used as more of a like zoom optic shots, when you have Chris flying towards the camera or banking away and going off in distance, or sort of rotating around. It wasn't designed for long shots, as unfortunately that sequence used, and the color correction and contrast and levels and all that didn't really help.
And I think one of the problems with just thinking about when we saw the deleted scenes in 2006, I think one of the things that didn't help, that Canon put a lot of publicity out about saying that the Metro Club fight scene was $5 million to shoot, and Clive all these years kind of thought that was true, and then having to sort of break it to him that actually it was kind of a load of sort of bullshit on Canon's part, and they were just kind of trying to sort of drum up interest, to sell the film, and in actual fact it was probably hundreds of thousands rather than anything else.
Yeah. I mean, I would probably imagine it would be more closer to $1 million, because you had the cars on hydraulics crushing.
That's very impressive, isn't it?
That would have been very expensive, I think.
That's very good.
And probably the shots. I mean, I don't know what other shots they. I mean, having Skip on the wires is.
That would be.
Chris took some hell of a risks doing that film, because he's lifting that skip, which, I mean, I don't know if it was a real skip or it was but as you know, towards the end of the film, that he's flying underneath the car, lifting Lenny, and he was under a real car, and they're on wires, and he's attached to the underneath of the car, and like, God, if them wires snap, Chris is going to go splat. It's like
I've got a video coming out soon with some interviews from the cast and crew, and one of the cast members recalls sort of a story of people just driving along the motorway around Milton Keynes, on the actual motorway, and suddenly they see Chris Reeve and wires just fly over the motorway. Just imagine, something had gone wrong, and that was like, you wouldn't make that, you wouldn't see Henry Cavill doing on very thin wires, and so it is quite impressive. The
CGI now,
the fearlessness of the man, I think, to put themselves in those kind of situations, I think, says a lot, because they did have a few accidents, didn't they, on Superman 4? I think with wires breaking, and it was.
I think one of the crew member die? Was it crew member died in the film?
There was somebody who was doubling for Mark Pillow, and he was being raised to go through the levels of the Metro Tower.
Yes, did he break his neck or something?
Well, he broke both his heels.
Heels.
And he died. It wasn't anything to do with that. I think he had a brain tumor, I think, in the 90s, but he wasn't that old. But the injury did end his stunt career. It was never the same since. And I think when Clive Mantle throws Superman and he goes over the cars, I think the stuntman broke an arm, or maybe even both his arms. So I think there was quite a few. And again, there's I won't spoil it because I'll let you watch the video. But I speak to Matt McDonald, who plays one of the policemen in the quarry at the beginning.
Oh yeah.
And here's a particular sort of hair-raising story of something that would happen only on a small budget Rush film compared to a bigger one. So it's amazing nobody did get seriously, and it wasn't in the papers, and you could have had all kinds of health and safety things. So
yeah, it's crazy, because today, I mean, the health and safety is so different now. If you have an actor flying on wires, they haven't just got wires attached to the waist, they've got wires attached to the arms, to the legs. there's like a puppet on, literally puppet on a string.
Yeah.
And they do that obviously to take off the strain of holding your body in position.
Mm.
And it's but yeah, I mean, back then they took risks, and Chris was one of the biggest. I mean, don't forget, Chris used to fly gliders. You know,
Yeah, pilot,
so
yeah.
he was used to danger. You know, he didn't mind being in the air, and that helped his performance massively when he was, you know, when he's doing the Superman films. You know, he could move aerodynamically in the air, and you know, yeah, it's just such dangers, but it was the only thing they could do. I mean, apart from going with a miniature, but you know, miniatures, all right, they used miniatures in Superman 4. Well, they used them in all the films, but they can look a bit stiff, you know, if you
Yeah.
if you film too close, or if you film too close, they look like a model. And if you know, if he's got him going like that, and his arms not going like that, it just looks like a model, you know. But yeah, they took a lot of dangerous risks.
Oh yeah, yeah. Just to finish off our conversation, I did notice one of your videos on your channel that I think is a lot of fun is the Superman meets the Death Star. I just wanted to
Oh
know
yeah, that's good.
kind of how what inspired that idea, and was it fun to do?
Uh, you know what? I can't remember what inspired me. I think I watched a clip from from Star Wars, and I thought, yeah, I wonder if what would happen if Superman took on the Death Star. And I thought,
Mm.
and then I had this idea, and it just storyboarded into my head. And I had, you know, Chris getting smashed into the moon, and literally ends up in the middle of the moon. And because of the force of the impact of the laser, it just cracks it in half.
Mm.
And I just built it up bit by bit. It was all storyboarded in my head, and I had a lot of fun making it. I added some CGI 3D elements to it, and because the films were similar era, it was easier to sort of combine them, and sort of and I went through all the films. I tried to keep most of the footage from Superman 3,
Mm.
because like the shot when he's being chased by the rockets and he turns around, you know, and it's like, it was the best shot I could use. And I thought, right, I'm going to try and use most shots from that. And I used a bit from Superman 4 as well. And yeah, I mean, I had one idea I wanted to do, but I didn't have the footage, was from the deleted scene in Superman 4 when he saves the little girl in the tornado, which is obviously his daughter in real life, Alexandra. And there's a shot of him when he's flying like that, and
Yeah.
he's got like his eyes are closed. I wanted to do if I'd had that in HD, I would have actually had Chris fly into the sun,
Ah.
and then cut, and as if he's powered himself up and then gone through the Death Star.
Mm.
You know, that was one option I was going to do, but I didn't have the footage to work with to make that shot happen. I probably could have done maybe used a CGI model of Chris flying, you know, because I actually have I have actually got 3D CGI model of Christopher Reeve Superman,
Yeah.
that I've used for a couple of shots.
Mm.
So that could also be helpful if any restoration at some point.
Oh yeah, yeah. So say if with the release of the 4K, if there is a substantial improvement in the picture, that could be helpful to your future projects as well, even if it's just, you know, a clean
Yeah, yeah.
better.
The better the video quality, the easier it is to, you know, rotor brush and or rotoscope those shots. But you know, I mean, I would rather be able to work with the original footage if I
Oh, yeah,
could.
yeah, yeah. That's obviously
Because the thing with I did tackle a little bit of the flying shot with Chris and Margot,
Mm.
and I sort of softened the edge and all that. But the problem is there's so much movement in her dress that it's just, and his cape, and then you've got her hair. It's like, well, if I had the original elements, it would just be, I could easily remove the blue, soften the edging up,
Yeah, yeah.
and then adjust the levels and the color correction, and get balance the shots from when he's flying to when he's landing with her, and make it look a bit more cinematic, you know, in its appearance.
yeah, because at the end of the day, no matter how skillful you are, there are limitations of not having those original elements and those plates and things. So you can only kind of do so much. Just to finish off, I just wanted to ask about what you think the future of Superman in cinema, because I'm going to assume that everybody watching this has seen Black Adam, and of course it was it was one of the reasons why I wanted to sit in the cinema, because I kind of knew 99% that he was in it.
You've just spoiled it for me now. I haven't seen it.
Not seen it.
No, I'm joking. I have seen it.
I was going to say, you can't be if you haven't seen it.
I was just winding you up there. No, I have seen it. Yeah, it's. I mean, I think Henry Cavill's had a bit of a raw deal in the past. I'm not the biggest fan of Man of Steel in the Zack Snyder's interpretation. I felt the character was a bit too dark and miserable, and I'm really looking forward to seeing Henry Cavill sort of play a much more lighter incarnation of the character, and more of how Superman should be.
Yeah.
I hope that he will do something with his Clark Kent character, and because the only problem I have with Cavill is that his Clark Kent is too much like Superman. It's just like he plays it like he plays Superman, just puts a pair of glasses on, and it's to me, if you're going to play both parts, you've got to put some difference in it. You've got to change your body, your tone of voice, your mannerisms. And I think that's what Christopher Reeve done really well. He divided the characters. Yeah, I know later on he kind of toned it down a lot, but he still kept a bit of that awkwardness with Clark.
Yeah.
In comparison to Superman, who's more confident. But yeah, I'm really interested to see what happens with it. I think Cavill has a potential to be a really good Superman, a modern take of Superman. For me, Chris will always be the best. He'll always be the top dog in my eyes. But I think Cavill has an opportunity to. I know he's getting on close to 40 now, so he's got a good few years left. But I think, there's potential for him to do a couple of films. I'd like them to explore different villains in the universe. Potentially maybe Mongol or Brainiac. Darkseid, I mean, would be cool, but I think that you're going back into the Zack Snyder sort of Justice League kind of direction, and I think they kind of want to go away from that. I think they want to go in a different direction, and it'll be interesting to see how the future is for Superman. And you've got the TV show as well, which I actually do enjoy. Superman and Lois as well. That's another good.
I don't know what they're doing with that. But I have heard. I think that was for someone on Facebook where Warner Bros. Kind of seeing how viable shows like Superman and Lois are, and the Arrowverse, and there is some suggestion that their time is a bit numbered. For something like Superman and Lois, I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems like if they're going to get rid of other those kind of shows, there's lots of shows around it that are less successful that you get rid of first before you got rid of Superman and Lois. But there seems to be some very, very, non-emotional, harsh choices, like with the Batgirl film, of just saying, right, we write like this, we don't like that. There seems to be a strong business sense, which of course you need, but it seems to be sort of in a bit of worrying times for some things.
I honestly think though with Superman and Lois, if they cancelled it, it would be one of the biggest mistakes that they could make, because what we need now is more Superman.
Well, that's it. You need more. The core characters, don't they?
Yeah, I mean the issue we've had is in the past Warner Brothers has been fixated on Batman, and Batman has always been more popular in terms of Superman. But I think it's more of a question of that no one's really handled the character well enough on screen. Yeah. And I think Superman and Lois. When I first heard about the promise of the series and there was going to have the two sons, I was going to go, I'm not sure about this. Yeah, but I'll be honest with you, it's hit the nail nearly every episode. It's been an absolutely brilliant show. And I think it has a lot of potential to do 5, even 6 or more seasons. I think it can go on for quite a while. And it's so many, and I honestly think it's one of the better shows that's come out of the superhero TV series. In terms of Supergirl, it's much better than Supergirl.
Yeah.
Supergirl, the first season was good, but it was a bit more, I think, related to the teenager years, whereas I think Superman and Lois appeals to teenagers, but also adults, because you've got the angle of the kids in school, but then you've also got the adult side of it as well. And I think it's more of a family show in that sense.
I think that's why I liked the Dean Cain Terry Hatcher series more than perhaps Smallville, because that was perhaps aiming, you say, a bit more, like a teenage audience, and I liked a bit more sort of, the characters more established. I mean, I would quite like to see Brandon Routh, back as a sort of an older Superman. He did very, very well in I mean, that Crisis of Infinite Earths, I thought, was a bit of a mess, but there were some good moments in there. So it'd be interesting if they could sort of do that. And that there is some rumors that the rights to Christopher Reeve's likeness has been agreed on, and maybe they'll use, but I don't know if that's any more than hearsay, really.
Yeah, I mean, I can't see what, I mean, I've heard it was going to be supposed to appear in the Flash movie that's supposed to be coming out. I mean, it may be just his image on a newspaper, like the Batman in Crisis, or it may be having
very
flying,
subtle,
or having flying off in past the sky or something like that. I don't know, but I think as you mentioned about Brandon Routh, I think it would be great to bring him back in an episode of Superman and Lois. I think the problem with the Crisis was that if you've read the comic book, there's so many superheroes. It's just
a bit crowded, isn't it?
It would cost. I mean, it would probably put the network out bankrupt if they got all these actors in to play all these superheroes. They wouldn't have any budget left.
Yeah.
It'd be like Canon all over again. It's like,
I think it would, yeah. I think it's interesting that there may be spin-off things, with maybe a Superman versus Black Adam that they're obviously alluding to. So maybe a couple of Superman standalone films, best case scenario, maybe a Justice League 2 and 3, and maybe so different, rather than just a straightforward, Superman film, perhaps.
I've had this. I put a discussion about this recently on my Facebook, and I said, Superman. Sorry, if anyone's not seen the film, but obviously we assume you have. He shows up at the end of the film, but then I'm thinking, well, all this commotion was going on during Black Adam. Where the hell was he? It's like,
that's a story in itself.
So I think the problem, what they need to do is, if they do a Superman and Black Adam, there needs to be an explanation of where he was. Was he stuck in the Phantom Zone or something, which could be a good angle they could use, which could then
sorry, go on now.
Which could then be integrated into a Superman, like a Man of Steel 2, and maybe that explains, which will be set, because I imagine that if they make a Superman standalone film, it would probably be set before Black Adam. Would explain why he was not there, because it just seems like, well, if you've got someone who's got powers like that, who's super strong, fast, and that, you're going to send the big boy out first, aren't you? You're going to send the top dog, so that it would be interesting to see how they explain his absence.
I can't remember what the excuse they used for Superman not being in Supergirl in 1984, but maybe they could just sort of dig that out.
He was sent on a peace-seeking mission to a galaxy that scientists said was something like 1 trillion light years away.
There's the Superman film right there, isn't it? You could sort of,
which is I kind of, why I was kind of looking at is maybe that's where I think Superman Returns fits into it, because like it goes back to Krypton.
Yeah.
And I think that's where they've kind of played it off from there, I reckon. And they used that line from Supergirl. Because, as you know, Chris was originally supposed to be in Supergirl, but dropped out shortly before filming. And the original story was that he was supposed to, he gets old or sick because of Selena's magic. She has to save him from get the Omega Hedron back, stop Selena, and then there's going to be an end sequence where they fly off together, as as cousins. And again, there's an original cut of Supergirl out there somewhere, 150-minute long, as far as I'm. So that'd be interesting. I wonder if that's somewhere in the vaults.
Yeah, because there's a couple of versions that are available if you buy the American releases, but there's other ones out there, and it was because it was a director somewhere in time, I think, that did Supergirl, and of course he
Gene Swartz.
Yes, that's he did
Santa Claus the movie as well, man.
Yeah, so you would have thought so. They obviously Christopher had a working relationship with him, but I suppose it was not a dig at the director that he didn't come back, but obviously more what happened with the Soul Kinds, and even a familiar face behind the camera wasn't enough to sort of lure him back, unfortunately.
As far as I know, Chris had just finished doing Superman 3 at the time, and at the time he was tired. He didn't want to play the part, and I think that was one of the main reasons he dropped out from doing Supergirl. There was an interesting sequence which I think it was filmed, but in Supergirl, the protester comes out in front of the car and says, "Selena must go," and then it cuts. And if you watch the scene towards the end, there's a puddle of water on the floor. Apparently, Selena uses her magic, freezes the protester, and she melts into a puddle.
Oh.
And that was one of the deleted scenes. I don't know if they filmed it. I'm assuming they did, but whether they actually finished the effect or what, I don't know. But that apparently was in the extended version. With the original cut, maybe they thought it was too dark for the film, perhaps. But yeah, there is a couple of shots. I think there's a shot where Linda Lee, she cuts her hair with a heat vision. And so that's just extended scenes. It'd been interesting to see if they still exist.
Oh yeah.
And whether they were actually filmed, See, I'm all for these extended cuts because it gives fans an opportunity to watch the film in a different way. With Superman the movie, you can, if you want to watch the theatrical version, you've got the theatrical version, you've got the special edition, or you've got the 3-hour version. And it's sometimes nice to sort of can't we watch the theatrical? I'll put the 3-hour one on. So
I think that's part of the mystique, isn't it? Something like, say, Superman 4 is that, and things like Supergirl, all the stuff from Superman 2 that we still haven't seen, and so on and so forth, is that there's so much potential, there's so much alternate ways to watch the film. And I think, if Superman 4 was restored, it wouldn't just be Superman fans that would want to see it. It'd be film historians, film students, all sorts of people that would be interested in it.
I can tell you something now, and I hope Warner Brothers listens to this. If they released Superman 4 in its original cut, it would sell more copies than Superman the 3-hour cut.
I think it would.
For the simple reason is because no one's ever seen it before. And curiosity will make people buy, and they will buy it. They will, and they'll probably sell more than they'll have done with the first film. Just based on the fact that you've got a film of footage that people have not seen before, and I really do think that there's a good money spinner there for them.
It's Christopher Reeve, it's Gene Hackman, it's big names that are in these scenes, and it is, if spun correctly, it is something that I think would be a worthwhile thing for them to do.
I mean, Martin Larkin mentioned a sequence in Superman 4 where Nuclear Man uses his powers and raises all these taxi cabs in the air, and he wasn't sure if it was filmed, but apparently it was. And Superman apparently grabs one of them
Yeah.
which might explain the promotional image where he's got his finger on holding it up.
Yeah.
And there's a woman, and then he says something to the woman, and she says, "It says, don't worry, ma'am, I've got you," or something like that. As it's kind of a throwback to the first film. So, and apparently that was shot. So that again, it's like an extension of I don't know how well it was shot because don't forget it's budget, with Canon, it's probably, I imagine there's probably wires all over the place. So it probably cost them too much money to take out the wires at the time, and they just scrapped it. But it would be interesting to see those shots as well. And
I can't remember whether it was the commentary I did with Martin or Harrison, where we did kind of cover, mention that taxi sequence, and I think there was some suggestion from what they were saying that would indicate that it was indeed shot. So
yeah, there was a shot. I think Martin put a picture up. It was a ball. It was basically the side of the building. And I think it showed you some of these taxi cabs. So I think it was shot as a miniature, because obviously it'd be too dangerous and expensive to shoot the full size ones. But yeah, I think it was shot, at least maybe partly shot. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of material that we haven't seen, and it would be great to have Superman 2, the extended cut. Superman 3, the TV cut, which I grew up with, as I said to you the other day. I had it on VHS, and that was the version I knew, and I've always come to know. And when I bought the US version of the DVD when it first came out in 2001, I think it was, wasn't it? 2001. And I was disappointed. I said, "Where's all the footage gone? They've cut off all." But then I've come to realize that I'm actually watching the theatrical cut of the film, and I grew up with the extended TV version. So
there's even some films whether it's false memories or not, but I'm pretty sure it isn't, that sometimes when you see films in the cinema and then you get them on VHS or DVD, I swear that sometimes they're slightly different. There was a bit in one of the Star Trek films where I thought they cut out a kiss at the end of Star Trek Insurrection between Picard and his love interest, and I'm sure I saw that in the film. When you got the DVD, it wasn't there, and I got the trading cards from the film, and it had that shot. And there was a bit in Batman Forever, I think, when after the Riddlers destroyed the cave, and I remember a line saying from Alfred, I think it was a good thing that the Riddler didn't know about the cave underneath, the second cave. And so whether that's just me, I don't know where I would have got it from otherwise, because I hadn't seen anything before that would have planted the idea in my head.
I don't think you're having a Mandela effect. So I think it's. I think I know what you mean. I watched I was watching a trailer for 10 Things I Hate About You the other night, and in the film, like the council says, most people think of you as a witch. And I thought, I'm sure she said bitch in the film. And when I watched the film, she actually does say bitch. So they change. Sometimes they will use alternate cues, or they'll change a couple of dub words. So you're probably right. You've probably seen it. You have seen it a bit different in the cinema. Maybe something to do with the ratings. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, it could be, or it could be like with the Superman 4 theatrical version. That some cuts are different in different territories, and I think Casino Royale, the Daniel Craig film, that had a bit more of the torture sequence in the US version that we in the UK didn't get for many years. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Val Kilmer's The Saint.
A long time ago, yeah.
And there's an entire sequence at the end, which is a big battle in the villain's house, and big explosions and fight on a chandelier and stuff. And that was all cut, but in the Russian prints, it was there. So sometimes there are differences, as we know.
Well, it's like yourself, being from the UK, you'll know that Superman 4 growing up, you had the tornado sequence,
Yeah.
and he stops the Russian missile launch,
Mm.
you know, and those were cut from the American theatrical cuts,
Mm.
but appear on the UK and Japanese version, the Laserdisc, because Jim Bowers has put the Laserdisc version of those two scenes
Mm.
online. And again, the same thing when I bought it on DVD and Blu-ray, it's still very jarring to watch because I know where those shots are,
Yeah.
and the music, you can hear the music cutting.
Mm.
Because they've taken out that piece of music cue from those shots that originally was in the scene. So
Mm.
it's really weird. You know, you get these different variation cuts of the film. I know, like for example, when they show Back to the Future on TV, um, especially on TV, they do an alternate version of the film. They say, well, my calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious shit.
Mm.
Excuse my language. You might have to beep that out.
Fine, mate.
uh, but on the TV version, well, at least I think in American, he actually says, when this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're going to see some serious stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they don't like swearing in America in a lot of TV films, at least.
I think when you
So,
start to get into differences with TV versions, I mean, the whole bag of worms, isn't it, in terms of what's cut and what's edited for different watersheds, or sometimes just to get the ad breaks in. You know, it's the reverse
yeah,
of wanting a longer version of Superman the movie to sell more advertising. Actually, we've got the 10 o'clock news coming up. We need to lose 15 minutes or something. And
yeah.
Mel Gibson's Maverick in particular, and that
Mm.
was done on TV, 10 years ago or so. That was massively cut because they just wanted it to be a bit shorter for. And when I got the and I seen it in the cinema a few years before, and I was thinking, where's this scene gone? Where's that? And I was having that false memory thing again of thinking,
Yeah.
and I
I'll
got,
get dementia.
oh yeah, here it is. I'm not mad, you know. So it is
Mm.
fascinating, the whole subject, isn't it? Really.
It
Uh,
is. I mean, the only thing I say with a lot of these sort of extended cut, TV versions is that they are generally not what the director envisions.
mm,
That's the only downside of it. I think I'm sure. I remember hearing or reading that Richard Donner wasn't too pleased with the idea of the 3 hour cut being released.
I think
If
that's putting it mildly. I think he said he'd take his name off it if they ever did it, and I
Yeah,
think he only got round it because they put the Donner cut version on the Blu-ray and said, we are preserving the vision while
mhm.
giving the fans which was kind of a sort of, here you go, Richard. This is now we want to make our money. So I think it was kind of, that was the way they got around it. But yeah.
I think it's like when they did the Richard Donner cut of Superman 2.
Mm.
They had to wait for Marlon Brando to sadly pass away because
I think it did.
they had to because they would have had
Harsh
to
as
pay him a
it
lot more money for
Yeah,
the
as
third
harsh as it
part.
is, I think it did make it easier for them to do it. And also, I think some of the budget for Superman Returns helped pay for the Donner cut. I think there was
Mm.
or certainly the fact that there was a hype for another Superman film kind of led the way. In the same way that for future cuts of Christopher Reeve films, the more new Superman product there is out there, the more we can tie it in with this or with that, and
Well, yeah, definitely, yeah.
that's a potential as well. I just wanted to end by just saying, do you have a favorite scene from the film, and also a favorite deleted scene?
Oh, favorite scene.
Mm.
Now you're asking. I have two.
Mm.
Um, and in fact, they're very, very close to each other. Um, Probably the shot of when he's changing between Superman and Clark Kent, and Lacey and
Mm.
Lois in the
Yeah.
apartment, which is quite funny
Mm.
because he's basically double dating or he's cheating, really. He's like,
You know himself. Mm.
and I think also when he meets Lex for the first time since Superman 2,
Mm.
and it's that chemistry between Chris and Hackman. Yeah, those are probably my two favorite scenes. In terms of the deleted scenes, I'll be honest with you, I would say it's the first Nuclear Man.
Yeah.
Because the whole Nuclear Man 1 is the catalyst for the film. You know, when he goes and meets Lacey. Well, I know we haven't seen that clip, we haven't seen the footage yet, but because when he meets her for the first time, he remembers her, and when he becomes Nuclear Man 2 later on, and that's the catalyst for the plot of Lacey, his character in the film. So yeah, probably the Nuclear Man 1 sequence. Maybe also the shot when Lacey smacks.
Yeah, that's a good moment.
Nuclear Man goes whack like that. He just sort of turns his head like. I mean, he's like, he probably didn't even feel it, but it's like it's still a good shot. So yeah, those are probably my favorites.
Yeah, I think for me, probably, and again, probably a lot of people would say the same. The speech at United Nations, I think, is.
Oh, why didn't I mention that? God, I'm thinking the most obvious. Yeah, that. I'm sorry.
Well, your answers are all interesting because everybody says, "Well, I've just given the boring answer," but you've given some really good ones. I suppose from an interesting moment, I do like the double date as well. There's a bit where he's left as Superman, he's coming through the lobby as Clark, and he sort of sees Lacey and he slips. He does a sort of awkward hi. His little. It's like, I do that in real life occasionally if I can.
I hope you don't fall over there.
No, not the falling over, but it's little sad things that no
This
one
shows you what a trooper he was to do that, because I mean, you could either take it one of two ways. Either it was accidental, or he really planned that, and like he risked himself slipping over doing it. And I think he planned it, but it was the way he done it.
Looks like the floor was a bit slippery, or maybe they put something on it to help him, but it does look like a perfect bit of comedy. And I suppose deleted scenes wise, it's probably Gene Hackman playing both sides, getting captured, and the whole taking the hand, which again is an old joke. It's been in so many things before, but it's a nice little. I think anything of Gene Hackman, I think, is and there's some bits in that extended flying sequence, which I think some of it doesn't quite work, but there's some lovely shots of Chris Reeve and smiling at Lois, and it's very affectionate. That, so I'd quite like to see perhaps the extended version of that scene restored.
Oh, when he gives her that push, boost. That's it's quite sweet. It's quite it's a bit of a weird sequence, but it's sweet at the same time. It's like, because he's got that power to sort of like almost for a couple of seconds give his power to her.
And that would be a good excuse as to why somebody can breathe in space, because he's giving some of his power. So maybe, I don't know whether that was a logical reason for it, but you could perhaps, as an extension.
Well, in the comic books, it's said that the reason Superman can lift heavy objects without it crumbling is that he basically generates a field around the object.
Okay.
So when he lifts it, the object becomes weightless. So it's a bit like I suppose you could say like a force field in some regards, and it stops everything. It stops it from collapsing. Like when he lifts up the lake, and he's grabbing on the edge of the lake, and if he's pulling the ice lake up, I mean, if you did that in reality, it would just break apart, So it has some sort of almost like a telekinesis type effect, where he lifts it up and everything becomes weightless. Just as he can defy gravity, he can sort of defy the gravity of the object he's holding, which is why he can lift it up without straining or breaking it apart.
And I think making sort of favorite scenes, the tornado sequence and the missile sequence from the Around the World fight, they were always, favorite scenes of mine. So yeah, to see those gone were kind of sort of doubly shocking from that point of view.
Yeah, it's just that it's jarring. It's you know, when
Well,
you're used to something.
it's a lovely matte painting as well, isn't it, of the Russian backdrop where
Mm.
and it's of course in the op- opening before you see Gene Hackman addressing the Kremlin. So, and that's a wonderful painting that Peter Earnshaw, Howson Earnshaw's father, did. And of course, it was used twice, and they cut it both times. So
Yeah,
it's never kind of been in the film.
again, hard work that's been pushed aside. Really,
Yeah,
it's
and another one of those reasons why we need to see it all restored.
yeah.
Well, I wish you very well with your projects, and I hope that your hard work is rewarded by the fact it's out there and people appreciate it. But I very much hope that it's done officially down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, you know, I think it's what's kept me going is the fans,
Mm,
you know, and they're the most important people.
yeah,
You know, I'm just one jigsaw piece in a big puzzle, you
mm,
know, and I'm just trying to fit the pieces in together. But the fans are just all a part of this. You know, we're all part of this journey together.
mm,
You know, and just as the Richard Donner cut was released because of the fans,
yeah,
you know, the fans wanted that, and the 3 hour cut I think was something the fans had wanted for a long time,
yeah,
and you know the praise and you know I've been getting from the fans and the support I've been getting has been incredible, and you know I love every single one of them, you know, that have been getting behind this because it's made me keep my passion going. You know, even though I'm doing other work at the moment, I'm always thinking about Superman 4 and
mm,
what I want to do to it and how I can improve it. And I'm waiting patiently for that email to come through to Warner Brothers and say, "Hey, we've
mm,
seen your stuff. We want to get you on board."
mm,
I'm still hoping that we'll get that email. You know, I know it's a lot to ask. You know, I've been trying to push it around.
mm,
I've tweeted to James Gunn, Dwayne
yeah,
Johnson. I've tried to sort of you know get them interested as well, and hopefully you know is putting the bait out there and hoping that somebody is
mm,
going to take the bait. Well, take the bait, but someone's going to take. I'm going to get a bite
mm.
somewhere down the line, and maybe get some success.
Because I think, however, obviously, as you say, it is unlikely, but there's always the possibility. And the one thing I'm reminded of now is that there was a guy did a fan version of the Doctor Who opening sequence,
Hmm.
and it was all the a watch that sort of came apart and this and it's all sort
Oh,
of and the BBC saw this
hmm.
and they brought him in to do the Peter Capaldi sequence, and he actually did it
Oh
based
wow!
on a fan video on YouTube. So
Oh, you never know.
it can happen, Of
Yeah,
course,
yeah,
Hollywood might be a bit different,
yeah.
but it is a magical business sometimes, and it
Well,
is possible.
didn't there's a guy on YouTube done deep fakes, and he
Oh,
got taken
Disney,
on for Star Wars, didn't he?
yeah,
IBM.
yeah,
Yeah, so it's possible. But as I said, different studios work differently, you
mm,
know. And the thing is that you only need someone who's a big fan,
mm,
you know, and sees the potential. You
mm,
know, I see the potential,
mm,
like a lot of the fans see the potential, and I think it's important to listen to the fans because at the end of the day, we're the ones buying the product, you know,
yeah,
and you've got to keep the fans happy. If you're not going to keep the fans happy, you've not got any business model. And I think it's, you know, if I was the executive of Warner Brothers now, I'd be saying, right, let's get on the message boards. Let's have a look and see what the fans say. What do they want?
mm,
What is it they actually want to see on the screen?
yeah, yeah,
And then work from that. And I think that I mean, you're never going to make everybody happy, unfortunately. Everyone's got their own ideas of what they want, but I think people want to see more of Superman. You know, not just in cartoons and TV shows, but films, whether it be the old films or the new ones. Anything that's got Superman in it is great, you know, and you know, I feel that the character hasn't had the best time over the years.
No.
You know, in the 90s, you only had Lois and Clark, New Adventures of Superman, and then you had the animated series, New Adventures of Superman, which was really good. But we haven't really had a film until, as you said, Superman Returns, and then it kind of died off until, you know, Man of Steel came out.
Well, I think as we've already covered, Superman seems to be turning a good corner now, and the fact that Henry Cavill is back, is it a coincidence that we're now hearing about the 4Ks? Is there now, you know, there seems to be a lot of Warner Bros. People saying that we want to focus on franchises and get Superman out and another Harry Potter film, you know, all that kind of thing. So there seems to be a willingness that wasn't there a couple of years ago. So if it is going to happen, it's going to probably be now. It's probably going to be in the foreseeable future. So, you know, so for something, you know, for a cut here or you know, so I think it's quite interesting and an exciting time to be a Superman fan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy if they just do a series of films that are not connected to any of the other heroes, focusing on Superman, Brainiac, Mongol, whatever that they want to do in terms. I'm happy to go in that route. You know, they don't have to be like, he doesn't have to be in every other film, you know, to show that he's there. You know, they could be set in their own sort of mini universe bubble kind of thing. So yeah, I'm interested. As you said, it's a good time, a great time to be a Superman fan, and I think, you know, we may have a surprise, we might have a shock. The Superman 4K releases might be all the extended cuts, you know, which would be nice, but I would be disappointed, as you can imagine.
Yes, and it's a strange way, isn't it? It's not quite the time for it.
I think if they did do kind of a release of the extended cut Superman 4, I probably would stop doing the clips then, because I think, well, what's the point? I've tried to show what can be done, and you know, and maybe it's a lost cause. I don't know. I may even just think, oh, sorry, I'll just do my own cut of the film.
Well, yeah. If you had it all, you could kind of just go to town and
and then I'll probably get sued.
Yes, possibly, but leave it in pieces.
Yeah. But part 1, part 2, there's all 24 parts of the film. So
or put it on the dark web, whatever that is. So
yeah. But so yeah, I am intrigued, but I just don't think that. I just think it's going to be a simple upscale of what we've had in the previous. I think I know it's Superman 2, the Richard Donner cut, Superman 3, and Superman 4 coming to 4K, and obviously we've already had Superman 1 in 4K, so it will probably be. I reckon it will just be an upscale up to 4K of what we already had.
Yeah, that's the cheapest way to do it, isn't it? And they'll still make some it. So at the moment, you know, that you can kind of see why, but it's more where that might lead to, isn't it? Sort of the reaction.
Yeah, I mean 4K. The only issue I think with 4K is that it's still quite expensive. You know, in terms of when you compare it to DVD.
Oh yeah.
You go to shop and you're still paying like sometimes up to 30 quid. Well, 24 to 30 quid for a 4K, because you have the DVD. I mean, a lot of studios do. They put the DVD version, the Blu-ray version in with the 4K, and I'm not a fan of that. It's like when Disney used to do when they used to first do Blu-rays, they used to put a DVD copy in with the film.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, well, if I'm upgrading from my DVD, why do I want another copy of the film when I've already got it on DVD?
Exactly, yeah.
And it's the same with 4K. If I'm buying a 4K release, it's because I want to upgrade from the Blu-ray that I already own. I don't want another copy of the film on Blu-ray, because I'll never watch it. And I've got probably about 12, 15. I see, can't see because I've got the background on. I've got about 12, 15 4Ks, and in all the times I've watched them, I've never watched the Blu-ray version. So it's
yes, kind of why would you? Isn't it really? Unless
yeah.
you've got, and most people don't have multiple living rooms or places where they've got multiple TVs and things. So that I think that's probably what it maybe was designed for. So somebody had, you know, a TV in the bedroom, they could watch the DVD, or they could. But nowadays, I think we just sort of we're all focused around one particular room of the house. So
You can always use it as a drink coaster, though.
you could, yeah, you could. Yeah, because when you get these big sets like a Marvel or Harry Potter films, you think, oh, this sounds impressive, and you realise, well, half of that is the same film. So it's
Yeah, yeah, it boosts the price up a little bit as well.
it doesn't do much apart from just sort of make the DVD shelf, you know, strain under the weight of it all, really. So,
yeah, unfortunately, if I get any more on my shelves, I won't have any shelves left.
I'm pretty much that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, well, I must let you go, but thank you very much for spending the time just talking about your
Yeah.
Superman and Gemini. It's been really fun.
It's been nearly 2 hours.
Well, I didn't know. I didn't. It didn't.
2 hours.
That's always a good sign, isn't it? When time flies. So
yeah, brilliant. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me on. Anyway,
it's my pleasure. And yeah, keep it up, and you know we're hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah. Cheers, and thank you everyone. Keep your support going. As I've got a petition on my YouTube channel. Spread the word through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, and maybe we can get Warner Brothers to listen and
And
eventually
your
do something.
channel is it Aaron Price Productions? Is that your
A Price Productions?
A Price Productions. So yeah. All your stuff's on there.
Yeah, I've got my email address. It's on my Twitter page, which is aaronpriceproductions@live.com. If Warner do happen to have a listen, so
yeah, perfect. Well, enjoy the rest of your week, Aaron, and great talking to you.
You too, Philip. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye.